Greetings, Guardians. My name is Bife here. So, spoilers ahead, Act 2 of Heresy is here, and we're going to be touching on what happened in this first week. It is a big story week. I mean, seriously, a massive story week. If you ignored the first spoiler warning, I'm telling you, please be aware, get out of here while you still can. Are they gone? Good. Let the madness commence. I think it's fair to say that as far as the content is concerned, Bungie cooked this week. Act 2 started off with almost as strong a bang as Act 1 did, and it also has one of the best, if not the best, stylized cutscenes in Destiny's history. There are a few blemishes, and I want to go ahead and talk about those first, because I think that they get in the way of some of the story stuff, and they feel like easily avoidable mistakes. I think that the team should take note. First things first. The beginning of the act has us going into the Court of Blades as our first quest step, at which point Sloane immediately talks to us about how we know that Eris is alive, something which we in our Guardian should not fully know. She also then confirms that we need to find the shards of Oryx's old sword Willbreaker to actually get her out of her throne world. Eh? Bit odd, kind of out of nowhere, and that's kind of something that makes sense, because the next quest step then goes into the actual moments that led us up to those revelations. So it seems like the quest steps almost got out of order. They're backwards for some reason with step 1 and 2. I think there may have been a decision here to allow players to run through the Court of Blades first in order to promote the new activity and show people that it's there. But ultimately, this seems to have just created an issue of making the steps go back to front. Getting the new activity in players' hands right away and not gatekeeping it behind the nether step is a good idea, but the narrative should have been adjusted for that. This seems like quite an unforced error on the face of it, but something tells me that an aspect of game development forced these steps into being back to front. It's just such an obvious mistake that I feel as though there must be some kind of explanation to do with game dev behind it, and well, who knows. There is a further problem with the narrative, another example of it just sort of introducing a concept out of nowhere a little bit later. Namely, it's the moment where the Drifter just drops the knowledge on us that the plan is to use the shards of Willbreaker in tandem with the broken hilt of Crota's sword, Light Eater. This is just sort of dumped on us out of nowhere, no prior discussion, no struggle for us to find the remnants of Crota's sword, even though we did have to struggle to find the remnants of Oryx's. So it's just very weird. These blemishes were so strange that they made me wonder if I missed some story dialogue while I was in orbit or something. Regardless, these complaints do not kill the vibe in anywhere near the same way as some other story decisions do. It's clear that these are errors, but they're not errors that completely break the story. Not in the same way that, for example, in Revenant, the idea of Aramis just being let out of prison kills the story for me. They are small bumps on a journey that still makes overall sense. Meanwhile, Aramis's release feels completely out of left field and completely out of character for individuals like us and Ido. All that being aside, let's talk about juicy lore stuff, and let's talk about what happened in the story. This week we saw the return of Eris Morn. After a few weeks of everyone in-universe thinking that she was dead, and even holding a funeral for her, she was able to reach out to us from within the Dreadnought using what energy she could spare to commune through a tear that she made in the Ascendant Plane. In order to get to her, we would need a powerful weapon, and that is why Eris recommended that we use the shards of Oryx's old sword, Willbreaker. As an aside, Willbreaker is a facet of the lore that's pretty close to my heart. The Blade of Oryx was one of 5 great artifacts or relics across the system that I named in a video a few years ago that we absolutely needed to recover in order to keep them out of the hands of the enemies. It's just that powerful. Willbreaker's shards fell from the weapon when we defeated Oryx, and from its core, Eris helped us to forge our first swords, which eventually made their way into becoming exotic weapons, namely the Raze Lighter, Dark Drinker, and Boltcaster. When it was complete, Willbreaker's power was unquestionable. It is probably the sword that Oryx wielded when he struck down Akka, Zivor-Arath, and Savathûn. It is the blade that cleft Ur-Anuk and Ur-Halak into being, splitting their larvae in two and creating the Dyad Deathsinger daughters of the Taken King. It was not only a powerful weapon in its own right, but it was also a part of what Oryx used to fire the weapon of his dreadnought. This weapon essentially created a pulse, perhaps an eversion pulse, although it's something not properly understood at this moment in time, but a pulse nonetheless. This pulse was something that rippled out from proximity to the dreadnought and created a sort of tear in the ascendant plane. Anything touched by the wave or the ripple was basically taken or was destroyed. Things that were left in its path were laid to waste. Knowing more about the very idea of eversion and the capability of the sword itself to cut into the ascendant plane, that's what makes me wonder if there is more to this weapon's power thanks to the sword than the actual weapon within the hull of the dreadnought. Maybe the sword is more of a catalyst to the weapon than we realized. We would need to recover a bunch of the shards of Willbreaker from various Hive and Taken, entities that were somewhere around the system, for the most part. However, when we actually pushed through in the mission to reforge the sword, things were very special. And I say this because, well, the sword that we created in the founts from the forge of the Taken is very much something which reflects the old form of the blade. If you take a look at the model of the weapon when you wield it, you can see the base of Crota's sword, which is a little more similar to most typical Hive swords. However, if you take a look at the blade of the sword itself, it is exactly like the one that he wielded against us in the Taken King campaign. The blade that we forged was only of temporary use to us, but it was sufficient to allow us access to Eris's throne world. Before we talk about that, though, it is worth noting that within the quest steps to reforge Willbreaker, we see a total of 6 possible shards to recover. It's possible that this isn't all of them, and it's possible that we won't be able to completely reforge Willbreaker until we get something else of rather important significance, namely, our old exotic swords. They might have been destroyed in the Red War when Gaul attacked the tower, or maybe they weren't. After all, in that very first mission of Destiny 2 Vanilla, we did see that Razelighter was being wielded by Lord Shaxx in the moments when the tower fell to the Cabal. That presents a whole host of interesting possibilities. If we do recover our old blades from Shaxx, if he still has them, then we might be able to infuse the blade with darkness again, and reforge the sword of the Taken King for good. What we'd be able to do with such a weapon of power like this is troubling. Unquestionably, it would be a blade of staggering power, and it would also mean that we would need to re-corrupt our old swords, which were liberated from Oryx's darkness with our light. Something that will be much easier now that we walk the paths of resolve and ambition. Next up, though, let's talk about Eris's throne world. We now know that it was indeed formed from the moment where she killed Savathun as the Hive God of Vengeance. It seems like that was possible because it was done in the moment before she rebelled against the sword logic, and was with that single strike able to forge that space. But even surrendering the power that she gained moments later, her throne world remained. A bit of a no-take-backs kind of moment, which I think serves Eris all the better, even if it did leave her stranded in her throne world momentarily. We gained access to the throne world by killing servants of the Subjugator that killed Eris. This act of vengeance was enough to carve open the seams of the Ascendant Plane that led to the Noiseless Chantry, Eris's throne world. She would call this place the High Heresy, and would proclaim herself to be the Heresiarch, the arch-heretic against the ways of the Hive. No questioning it now. At this moment, this is her crowning triumph. But I think that there is still an even greater victory ahead of us. That being said, all of this is introduced in one of the best stylized cutscenes in Destiny's history. If you haven't played the episode so far, I think it's worth playing just for this. I think it's possibly up there for the best cutscene they've ever done, and that's saying something. Amongst other things, this cutscene also gives us what is probably our best look so far at Xivu Arath. It also tells us what Savathun and Xivu would both do with the Echo of Navigation if they got control of it, with Xivu using it to return to her bloody path of conquest, and Savathun using it to more appropriately win control over the Hive and pry them away from their old pact with the worms. But the coolest part of all this is that it helped us set up what's coming next, which is Eris's plan. It looks like we're going to oppose all the Hive gods, and we're going to do it using Willbreaker. We're going to steal the Echo of Navigation, separating the memory of the Navigator from it using Willbreaker, and we're then going to imprison Oryx within Eris's throne world. Narratively, I absolutely love this plan for the stakes that it's presenting, but I also enjoy it simply because of the fact that if Oryx is jailed within Eris's throne world, well, suddenly you have an interesting bit of potential story for the future there. The memories of the Echo can be called upon by Eris in a time of need. If there is a moment where she needs to cleave some truth from it, she might be able to use Willbreaker there on its own. But there is some opposition to this plan already. Sloane has a plan that runs in the opposite direction in particular. She instead wants to use Willbreaker to destroy the Echo and deny its power to the Hive. Any who might use it for evil ends should be prevented from doing so. That's her logic. Eris, on the other hand, is still opposed to this idea and claimed that we could use the Echo to effortlessly navigate the Ascendant Plane. This is a claim that makes a degree of sense given Oryx's power and the raw power of the light and dark that are bound within the Echo. My question then is simply whether by navigating the Ascendant Plane, we're going to be able to find something in its inner depths. You know what I'm referring to there. But we should talk more on that because, well, there's some interesting developments on that front of things too. The deep is a little bit more complicated than I first anticipated. However, before we talk on that, I want to give the devs a quick note about Eris and the Drifters reunion. Very well done. That's it. No notes. I don't want anyone to start crying in the comments section. Anyway, there is something else we should discuss. If you go into the Nether, you can find a rather obvious worm underneath the bridge within the area near the Court of Oryx. This is something that leads you onto a new mission where you return to the Invasion Bay and into the corruption core of the Dreadnought once again. This whole quest is just bad news from the start. Not saying it is bad, I'm just saying that as far as our character is concerned, it's dangerous. With this quest, we start our journey down the other method of controlling taken power. Sloane learned the path of resolve, but the whispers from the Dreadnought in this mission compel us down the path of ambition. At the start of this, Eris reached out to us and literally lets us know that we're following a call directly from the deep. Then, Eris goes on to point out that it's a beacon of wanton purpose, not left behind for anyone in particular, but that it comes from a new entity that now inhabits the deep. This in itself is crazy enough, and I'll talk more on that in a second, but it gets worse. When we approach the corruption core, we are momentarily torn between dimensions and beckoned forward. It's in this moment that once again, we get to see the new expression of taken energy, which manifests once more alongside the many eyes of suffocating terror. After repelling a Taken assault and breaking their power, we learn to bend the corruption of the Taken to our will, and therefore we take our first steps on the path of ambition. Now, I know I've been talking a whole lot about the Winnower, and my initial thought was that this might well be the Winnower guiding us down this path, but I wanted to go ahead and play you all one other line that is spoken by Oryx in the Court of Blades, a line that mentions the Winnower by name but is not actually about the Winnower. This is possibly one of the most important lines of dialogue this entire week, and it's just left for us to find at the beginning of a playthrough of the Court of Blades. Take a listen to this.
We are not alone in the deep. Something I cannot see stands between the Winnower and the Taken. Carve these offerings free from their weakness, King, before something else does.
So yeah, as it turns out, we are not alone. To put it quite simply, there is a factor that we haven't been able to anticipate yet. Whilst we have been fighting against the Hive Guards, and whilst Oryx has directly acknowledged the existence of the Winnower, there is another individual that has its fingers or claws or tentacles involved in this particular set of moments aboard the Dreadnought. And again, this isn't the Winnower, this is something standing between it and the Taken, just in the same way that Oryx did. But again, Oryx here confirms that it's not him, this is something else. This confirmation on its own is a revelation. This new entity bears the merit of further discussion for certain, but I think for the moment we can confirm that the many suffocating eyes of terror and the many tendrils of corruption are not the influence of the Winnower. Oryx would know. He has spoken to the Winnower and has been able to tell it apart from what else there might be. And whatever it is, this is probably behind these new Dire Taken as well, given that those same tendrils appear on their carapace as well. Heresy continues to absolutely fascinate me and has some of the best story and lore that we've had. I'm not gonna lie, this saves some of the episodes for me. It certainly does not take away from what I think were underwhelming performances of episodes with Revenant and Echoes, but man, Heresy is doing God's work here. It has some of the best seasonal content that we've seen in the game, and I think it really is up there with some of the best seasons that we've had. Splicer, Chosen, Witch, Seraph. Yeah, it's up there. Anyway, that's all from me for now. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, go ahead and leave a like and let me know your own thoughts down below in the comments section. Of course, you can hit subscribe and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications. But as per usual, know that your viewership as always is quite enough for me. And that in the meantime, my name is Bife. Per audacia ad astra. I'll see you, Starside.